Geraldo Rivera. Right now, you're joining us for our first annual Year in Review. We're working our way through the top news stories of 2011 that you probably didn't hear about. We start a review with the National Defense Authorization Act. In late November of 2011, the news broke that this year's Armed Forces budget contained language that gave the military the power to detain American citizens with suspected terrorist ties indefinitely without due process. This marks an abandonment of previous detention policy, wherein authorities could only detain sass mouths and campers with bad attitudes. Signed into law just over a week ago, this bill has the power to completely change American law enforcement for the worse, potentially eroding the freedoms and protections promised to us by the Bill of Rights. So naturally, no one's been talking about it. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that in any reasonable society, there would be massive and immediate outrage over legislation that can strip citizens of their civil liberties and potentially be used as a tool to enact some measure of martial law. You're right. But what you have to understand about the American people is that they're a bit like an emotionally distant, middle-class white family on Christmas. And draconian legislation that flies in the face of everything we love and hold dear, it's kind of like our creepy uncle. No one likes him. It makes it a bad time, but no one really wants to kick him out because it's Christmas, and honestly, we're all a little bit tired and hungover from the party last night. So we just avoid him. Let him sit in the corner, sipping his brandy, mumbling to himself. And of course, it's not helped by the fact that the one member of the family that knows he's a registered sex offender isn't telling us that it's probably not a good idea to let little Cindy Lou sit on his lap during story time. Yes. Now, the major news networks, who, if you're lost, are the metaphorical silent cousin in this hypothetical Christmas tale of alcoholism and shattered innocence, seem to have been avoiding this story, much in the same way that Michael Moore avoids vegetables. CNN did the best job covering it, with a grand total of 5 articles on their website, which was a nice technical difficulties. I'm sorry. Which was a nice contrast to the total lack of television coverage. Fox News, on the other hand, had exactly 1 article on the subject on their website, published January 2nd of 2012, several days after the bill had already been signed into law. But hey, they still managed to get the scoop on Justin Bieber's Rockin' New Jesus tattoo. Now, while we're still on the subject of legislation you really should probably know about, but probably don't, the Stop Online Piracy Act, a bill designed to give the government greater authority to pile drive the internet through the folding table of legislative power creep, has fared slightly better as far as coverage goes. Fox, MSNBC, and CNN each have about 4 to 6 articles on the subject, written since the bill was introduced in late fall, buried in the dark, sticky bowels of their website, with absolutely no primetime coverage on any of the television networks. The places where most people who turn to them for news actually turn to them for news. In fact, the biggest TV coverage SOPA received was when Ron Paul denounced it during a CNN interview. That's right, Ron Paul, the candidate voted most likely to rip the still-beating heart out of his opponents. Ron Paul, the candidate who thinks that corporate personhood is a good idea because that means he can tear the throat out of the military-industrial complex with his teeth. When a man like that is saying you've made a mistake, you should probably take a moment to listen to him. Now, a story that did get a fair amount of coverage was the Occupy movement, which some of you may be familiar with. It's attracted quite a bit of media attention, with live broadcasts of marches and sit-ins, interviews with protesters, and roundtable discussions of privileged white people asking the question, why can't the protesters just stop being lazy and become privileged white people? Granted, thorough and equitable coverage of occupation events was generally supplanted in favor of ceaseless coverage of celebrity deaths, such as acting legend Peter Falk and techno-wizard Dennis Ritchie. But thankfully, Fox News stepped up to fill the gap, covering out the Occupy movement more than any of the other networks, with such fair and balanced pieces as Occupy protesters burn American flag in North Carolina, Occupy protesters disrupt the Iowa caucuses, time running out for Occupy, classroom and class warfare in Virginia, and liberal scientists discover that drug-addled communist hippies eat babies. One of those might have been me exaggerating a little bit. Now,
Finally, one of the biggest examples of corruption and general dickery in the history of our military, the United States Air Force took the remains of 247 soldiers whose families they had promised they would give a proper and respected burial, and unceremoniously dumped their cremated remains in a landfill in Virginia. How they distinguish between this particular landfill and the rest of Virginia is still unclear. Naturally, the news media grabbed this story and ran with it, fanning the flames of outrage and disgust and leading the call for reforms in the practices of our military and federal government. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. They didn't do that. At all. No, the story got a meager 2 or 3 features on each of the major news networks because apparently CNN thought it more important to feature an article on their site discussing whether or not people should be allowed to say the word fuck on television. I know how I fucking feel about that right now. Thankfully, not every story fell through the cracks this year. For instance, Kim Kardashian's getting divorced. Yes, on October 31st of 2011, Kim Kardashian filed for divorce from her husband of 72 days, New Jersey Nets player Chris Humphries, denying mankind the possibility of them breeding a master race of douchebags. The news media exploded over this story, and hours were spent discussing the details of their divorce, the possible motivations for the split, and even the theory that the entire marriage and divorce was a highly orchestrated publicity stunt. All of this being a much more important use of the news media's time than covering any of the other things that happened on October 31st. Like, drone strikes killing at least 3 militants in Pakistan, Kenyan and Somali authorities joining forces to battle al-Shabaab militants, UNESCO granting Palestine full membership and Israel's subsequent outrage over it, the interim Prime Minister of Libya confirming the presence of chemical weapons in the country, Russia's negotiations with NATO over the European anti-missile shield reaching a deadlock, and the population of the entire human race officially reaching 7 billion. But if we're talking about how the news prioritizes what stories to tell, we have to admit that Fox News simply can't be beat. Such as when Eric Brolling's Follow the Money gave us a 7-minute-long segment on how the Muppets are communists attempting to subvert American values. No, seriously, stop laughing. Somehow, someone thought that a mediocre movie featuring a bunch of puppets posed a threat to the petrochemical industry. Now, yes, this was just one piece on Fox Business News and not Fox News proper. But I feel the need to point out that 7 minutes that could have been used for anything else were dedicated to throwing insults at a group of fictional characters that would have carried weight if this were 1953. It is also interesting to note that this segment has been taken down from Fox's website because even they recognize that it's stupid. But with all of the important stories getting swept under the rug and fluff pieces being pushed into the limelight in a ploy for ratings so shameless and audacious that it makes Alex Jones look like the elder statesman of subtlety, I think it only fair to end our segment by discussing something that was given its fair due in the media. I am, of course, talking about WikiLeaks and the legal battles its founder, Julian Assange, has faced. Assange made himself a controversial figure, and WikiLeaks itself has come under enormous financial pressure in an attempt by corporate and government bodies to shut it down for publishing classified information acquired from whistleblowers on the website, such as extrajudicial killings in Kenya, files pertaining to Guantanamo Bay procedures, top secret official Scientology literature, the membership of the list of the British National Party, evidence of Barclay Bank's tax avoidance, video of an ethically dubious Baghdad airstrike by American forces, and a U.S. intelligence report on WikiLeaks itself. In the face of such shocking revelations, it should therefore come as no surprise that nearly all of the media coverage WikiLeaks received was instead devoted to Julius Assange maybe having a sex scandal with 2 Swedish women. Now, why is it that the news media kind of, bites the monkey's butt, so to speak? Is it general incompetence, an emphasis on ratings over integrity, or is the fact that the major media outlets are all controlled by huge multinational corporations that are embroiled in global and political economic affairs a conflict of interest? Fox News is owned by News Corp, which has business interests in everything from animated TV sitcoms to the Australian National Rugby League. CNN is owned by Time Warner, which has business interests in everything from Batman comics to the CW network Supernatural. And MSNBC is owned by General Electric, which has business interests in everything. General Electric, for example, has been involved in several huge controversies, including a fairly shady track record with environmentalism, and the fact that from 2008 to 2010, the company didn't pay any taxes. At all. Now, I might be reaching here, but that sounds a little like a conflict of interest.